All right, it's International Women's Day, which, as you know by now, if you're watching this, you know I'm making International Women's Month by talking to women who inspire me and who I admire, in hopes that it will inspire some of you out there. So today, the theme, sorry, let me make sure I say the theme for International Women's Day this year was Inspire Inclusion. So I wanted to talk to women from all walks of life, and different backgrounds and different stories, because we all have a different story, so that we feel a little less alone in the world. So today I'm talking to my friend Amanda. I'm so excited. We worked together at Amazon a million years ago, it feels like. But we've stayed in touch, and I know she has this really interesting story, and so I want her to share that with you. So, Amanda, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, thanks for having me. A little bit of background on me. I'm Indigenous, and that's a big part of my life, and it's something that I take with me every day in everything I do. Background work-wise, I was in banking for 10 years. I worked through the financial crisis at Washington Mutual through the seizure and sale to Chase. I then transitioned and worked in nonprofit, which essentially requires you to recreate yourself and what your new norm is and how things function and work. I left that and I went to Amazon and got my master's degree while I was working at Amazon. And then I worked at Zillow for a couple of years, and now I'm currently at Expedia. So I've had a journey from working in content and knowledge management to craft how you actually communicate to the world and what that should look like in branding companies and working through PR issues, all the way through designing products and services, things like Prime Wardrobe and things like that. I've had my fingers on a bunch of really cool things. So I'm led teams, I've been an individual contributor, and it's been a kind of journey of self-discovery and figuring out who I am and what's most important.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you've had that opportunity to sort of flow in and out of different spaces. Maybe talk a little bit about how you've managed that. Like those are each every new job is a transition, but also when you change industries or spaces or roles, there's another form of transition that happens. So maybe talk a little bit about how that has shown up for you over the years.
Absolutely. My first big transition, when I was in banking for 10 years, with the collapse of that, I was very fortunate to have some training. They gave us some free training to go through and talk about figuring out what's important to you and literally going through and figuring out what those key things are. And it helped me kind of identify what my work style is and
Yeah.
who I am and what I need to be successful. That was super important to young me in my 20s, figuring out what good looks like and what I need. And there was everything from like, do you need to wear jeans to work? Or do you need to be able to have an environment that has the following things? And it really kind of helped shape of where I'm at my best and what I need. And I held kind of true to those. I revisit those because they change as your life changes, as your relationships in the world change. You kind of look at those differently and you say, like, what are the most important things I need to be able to resonate in different spaces? And for me, one of the biggest changes was going from for profit to nonprofit. The
Wow.
models are completely different. And a lot of people think, oh, it's compensation. It's so much deeper than that. It is the journey that you take to make decisions involves so many more people in a nonprofit sector. I was working specifically in healthcare. So this brought up the fact of we wanted to do something like renaming the internet, which at a tech company or an industry, you'd be like, yep, cool, that's a good name, let's go with it. This literally had to be a survey that went out to all employees. There was a name search. This was a 4-month process to decide what this was. And working with a branding company and everything because it was such a critical change. And I just literally one day they're like, we should call it Atrium. We should call it this because it was healthcare. I didn't know that Atrium had a negative connotation. And when we put that option out for this company, people were very concerned that that would even be considered as a name. And I just one day said, let's call it connection. It is the door that we walk through to connect everybody for this. And it stuck. And then it kind of became rainbow themed. And so I jokingly called it Rainbow Connection. So on the day it launched, that was on the homepage. And people were like, oh, that's funny. I'm like, wasn't meant to ever be funny, but
Right.
it actually resonated with people and it helped a transition that was so difficult that people have been holding on to this for years. It helped them see like this is a new positive thing. It's a new direction and it gave them the opportunity to see not all change is bad.
Right.
While change can mean a lot of things and be scary, you can also embrace it and it forces you to be a little more resilient and take on the fact of like you own this. You get to decide how change is going to affect you.
Yeah. I mean, plus it had its own built-in theme song with
It
Kermit the
did.
Frog. right?
with
Like,
a video. I mean, how can you go wrong?
I mean, let's bring Kermit along on all the journeys. That's what I say.
I'm for it. The Muppets,
Yeah,
80s it. Yes, I love it.
exactly. And I mean, I think, kind of diving into what you just said, like, change and transformation and making those transitions, they are hard. And yet we all recognize that we have to go through change. Like there's not some one of us who gets to be like, well, I don't do change. I'm just not going to, right? That's not how life works. Um, so there's an element of sort of developing resilience, right? Developing sort of the fortitude to make it through change. So how does that resilience? I mean, I think resilience gets a little bit of bad press, good press. It depends on how you view it. But how do you
Yeah.
think about resilience and the changes you've made and in the path you've taken?
Yeah, I think resilience for me in my context is you're going to be faced with something that's going to be difficult. Acknowledging it and understanding what those difficulties are, but also acknowledging the fact of you get to choose the path through that and what that's going to look like. You get to choose the light at the end of the tunnel and how long it takes to get there, so to speak. And so I think one of the biggest pieces personally for me was the fact of going through this fact of I struggled. Like when I went to nonprofit, I struggled a lot because I'm like, why can't we just do this? I'm used to having these resources. And then realizing the fact of where I was at and recognizing where I was at, that you might not have all those resources. Things are going to go away. It's going to take longer, but what can you create in that process? What are the things that you can build? What are the ideas that you've not explored yet that are going to be able to make things different? Even currently, moving from Amazon to Expedia, one of the biggest things is there's a huge culture difference between the two. But the
I
other
made that
piece of it
exact move,
is,
so it went from
I,
Amazon to Expedia. So yeah,
yeah,
me and Marilyn both,
it's
right?
huge. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And the other part of it is you're like, okay, embracing the past and what has worked. And then also looking at it and saying, there's so many different things that I like, what didn't work in the past too. And acknowledging the fact that nothing is Zen Nirvana perfect, whether it's personal or professional, but being able to say, here's the things that are working, here's the things that we need, and then say, but here's where we can go, and creating that new path, but taking the people who you're meeting in that new experience along the journey with you, making them understand, like, hey, I don't know everything. I'm learning a ton. Let's figure this out and build together. And that piece so much has resonated with me because um, you're not able always to take every piece of something and just because it worked for one group, what what works for one person does not work for every person, and being able to acknowledge that and look at it from the perspective of your resilience comes from the fact of you can understand and adapt to situations. It has nothing to do with your success or failure. It has everything to do with how do you embrace what's happening and say, here's what I can control, here's what I can influence and move forward with, and here's the things that I'm going to let go of.
Yeah,
And letting go, I think resilience gets a bad rap because a lot of it is you have to decide what to let go of.
yeah.
And for so many people, it's the fear of letting go and inability to move forward without that thing, that whatever that thing is for them. That is the part that is so scary, and that's the part that makes change difficult. The resilience piece of it is the fact of once you realize that you're not letting go of your core things that you need and what those values are to move forward, that's what keeps you going. And
Yeah.
that's what helps you get past the, like, oh, should I be doing this? Should I not? It's like, actually, no, I should and I can. And people are seeing these qualities in me. And so I should take that on and try it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have boundaries.
Yeah, of course, of course.
'Cause
Right.
resilience and boundaries go together because you got to be like, what are your firm boundaries and knowing who you are and what you want in order to be able to say, these are the things I need. It also helps you in situations where sometimes you have a situation you need to walk away from.
Yeah.
And that's the other piece of it too. Part of being resilient is being able to look at it and say, here's what I need, and here's the opportunity and where I'm at, and here's what I no longer can support and what is going to happen instead. And I think that's the other part. And it's such a foreign concept to a lot of people that like those two can go together.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that you said kind of at the beginning and then again mentioned here, I find that so many people, if you ask them, like people will say, let me back up. People will say something like, well, this doesn't align with my values. And then
Yeah.
when you say, what are they? They're like, well, I mean, I value, I just know it. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Tell me what they are. Tell me what your values are. And so I find one of the most important things I can do with my clients is say, let's figure out what your values are. Let's give them words. Let's get the words on the paper, right? So mine are, really I can rattle them off, right? Curiosity and connection and courage and agency. Like those are mine. And so if you know what your values are, then your resilience can align with them because you can
Yes,
say, these are my values, and I can make it through this change as long as these are can hold. But to your point, if you get to a stage where your values are being really knocked over and like we don't have that value here, we don't have that value, you may have to go, well, this is not the right spot for me, right?
exactly. It'll
Yeah.
help you figure out your fit there and in other places too, because I sit on two boards as well. I sit on one board who raises funds for domestic violence and another who is about history preservation.
Yeah.
And what I've learned over the last few years, I've been asked to be on multiple. I chose these two because of where they align with my core values
Yeah.
and what I want, because I'm about empowerment and visibility.
Yeah.
I'm about curiosity. I'm about evoking change. And I'm about looking at what we currently have and how do we evolve it. Like those are my core four that are super important to me. And so these two boards fit because of that reason. But where I've struggled is just like in the workplace, when you're working through boards and things like that, you have volunteers who are not committed to anything
Yes.
larger. And you have to decide, like, how and when is it, where can you flex, where can you not? And it adds a completely different dynamic to it. And even with that, I had a board member who refused to use pronouns. And we had to sit down and have a really long conversation about the fact of this is why this is important. And they didn't understand it. I'm like, we can agree to disagree on this. That's fine. But then you're going to use people's names versus using
Right.
pronouns.
Right.
And they were able to understand that. They just didn't understand. It was overwhelming for them, but coming in from a place of grace and looking at the situation and saying, this is somebody who they truly don't understand. It's not
Right.
coming from a place of malice.
Right.
Others thought it was. And I sat down with them and I'm like, this is actually coming from here. I'm like, so how do we empower you and how do we make you okay with this situation? Because they're great at what they do. They just don't understand the concept of that.
Yeah.
It's they're older and this is something they've never experienced in their life. And they're like, when I see someone, my brain goes here. And I said, that's fine, but ask them their name and use their brain. You use their name and engage because that's what's most important. So
Yeah.
that presence piece and that making sure that you can find a way through I think are the key things. As long as they align with your core values, from when it comes to what's important to you, that's what's most vital.
Yeah, no, I love that. I really do. I think that's so important. And I mean, you and I were talking earlier, and you made a comment about getting really good advice about the idea of presence over perfection. Talk about that a little bit and how that how that advice came about, but also how it has shown up in your life and in the changes that you've made.
I had a really great mentor, and I said, if there's one piece of advice that you could give yourself, because she was a CEO, and I'm like, if there's one piece of advice that you could give me as somebody who hopes to be there one day,
Yeah.
what would that be? And the advice was, be present, not perfect. You're going to feel like at times, if you are doing something with family or friends or your life outside of work, that you're failing work. If you're spending a late night at work, you're going to feel like you're failing the other.
Yeah.
All that I can do is focus on what's in front of me and schedule that time so I'm giving people what I can, but also protecting myself and my amount of time. Um, and the other piece of advice that she gave me is you have a cup of water that you can give to other people, but if your pitcher is not full that you keep with you, you are not going to be successful in anything that you do. I took both of those pieces with me because the present's not perfect has helped me balance and say, great, you're on these boards, you have this job, you have all of these things. Where's the time for yourself, which
Yes.
is the balance piece?
Yeah.
But the present piece is if I am in a board meeting, my phone is off. You have my full attention. If I'm in a one on one with an employee, I am focused on them and making sure I'm hearing them and doing things like, how are you doing? And checking in. I had an employee during the pandemic who's like, you're the first person who has asked me in over a week how I'm actually doing. And they broke down. It was a hard time for a lot of people. And they needed that safe space to talk to people. But being able to be present and hear people without distraction, without anything else going on is so, it is a gift that we do not give people enough to
Yeah.
actually focus directly on them and have full attention. And making sure too that we're not going to take that and say, oh yeah, I can do that. And let me just, I am over here and do this. It's like, that doesn't work. I changed companies during the pandemic, and I'm like, when I came to Expedia, there's a very heightened, like, I'm going to Slack you in a meeting. I'm like, I need you to know if I don't respond to you, it's because I'm focused. And I've started now, like this whole, when I talk about presence not perfect, I literally will say, I'm in a meeting for the next 2 hours, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
And that is enough for people to know that they are heard and that I've seen them, but I will be coming back to them. So I'm not perfect. I like, should I drop everything and respond to that? Maybe.
Yeah,
Or
but
putting a
that's probably
deadline
not going
around
to
it as
happen.
to,
Yeah,
yeah, putting
yeah.
that deadline around it so people understand that I hear you and I see you, but I can't deliver this. And it sets that expectation so that they feel heard and their needs are met too.
Yeah, I love that. I always have a rule when I'm leading people that my door, that people are like, oh, the door, everybody says their door is open, but do they mean it? Right. And
Yeah,
so my rule was, if you need something, the answer to Leah, I need a minute is always yes. I will always find you a minute. It may not be this minute, but I will find you a minute and I will do my best to do that minute today. Right. And
yeah,
so when I was at Klarna and people, I was constantly like, we were building an office and I was building a domain and we were figuring out how to do product even better. And I was getting slammed at every turn. So I used to joke that I was making decisions about, what should we do for H&M and is there toilet paper in the bathroom at the same time, right? On any given day.
totally.
So I was like, I don't know how those are both my decision, but sure. But I learned, I really, really learned to tell my team, like, I will talk to you today. I will find you a moment. Like, but this is not the moment. I can't focus on you right now. I want to be able to look you in the eye and hear you, but I can't do that right now. Right. And when you really honor that and people begin to trust it, then they know that they can say, do you have a second? Yep, I do. Let me move some things around and find you some time. Right. And I do think that that presence of being able to look people in the eye and say, I'm listening to you, I really am, is what people want in a leader. It's what we want in a friend. It's what we want in a partner. It's what we want in our moms. Like, it's what we want, right? And so certainly in our workplaces, finding a way to say, I'm here. I'm in it with you. Let's talk to me. Is so, like, listening is such, there will never be a moment when we wake up in life and say listening is something we can just stop doing, right? It is necessary.
Exactly. I had a team of 30 in Amazon. I'd worked in content for a long period of time. I had left and gone, and I'd worked in content. I launched Amazon Business, and they had like 140 pages. I got them down to a trim 65, and then was pulled. They're like, we really need you to work on it was high release products. So it was for customer service for their they didn't have a PMO, but we built a PMO because I'm like, you guys need one. There's 120 teams that you engage with, and no one knows how to do that. So let's
Right,
build that. So I
right.
built that and built them burn downs and all that good kind of stuff. And then I was asked at that point, and I was leading a team of 3. I gone and lead a team of 30.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these are former peers of mine. This could be a dice. I'm like, these people are friends on social media. I'm like, I don't know. Like, we have to have some conversations. And I was really concerned about it. And I sat down with one of my leaders, and he literally said, I just want you to take a minute and tell me every concern that you have. And let's look through every single one of them, just vet everything. And he wrote it on a whiteboard and just goes, okay. He's like, how can I help you with each one of these?
Right.
Because you were the person. And I was fully in the throes of imposter syndrome at that moment of like, I can't do this. It's such a huge team, all of these things. And we sat down, and it really boiled down to I was worried if I could be present for the team.
Yeah.
And this is somebody who, like, the way that customer service is structured, they are in charge of everything from products that are being deployed down to call centers and everything that goes on there, which is a huge amount of work.
Right.
And we sat down and had a really long conversation about what would be valuable to me and how that would happen. And this person did not have the time to have that conversation that day, but they made the time and they were committed to being in that moment with me.
Yeah.
And we created just a really, like, back of a napkin kind of like, here's how I handle my one-on-ones, here's how I handle my issues, and like really brought me into, and this is a VP, and
Mhm.
he'd been there forever, and just literally sat down and talked with me about how they handle the stress of the job and how they make things work. And it switched, and I was like, I think I can do this. And so helped with the imposter syndrome, helped to have me focus on what was important. And then having the balance of, I'm like, I have the stuff I do outside of work that's important to me. It's like, then that doesn't change.
Right.
Your days off don't change, nothing changes. And with my team, I set it up so that they would be seen. And I'm like, I might not be able to see you every day because I had teams in 5 countries. I had somebody in Germany, South Africa,
Right.
all across North America and South America. And I'm like, but here's what I can do, and structured it in a way so that they felt seen. And also the things that were important to them, to listen to them. This was a team that was on call and they shouldn't have been on call, and
Right.
worked through getting them off of a call process,
Right.
and just like really hearing people will let you evoke that change. And that's one of my core values: evoke that change and be like, here's what's going on, and raise awareness to it. That way they're empowered to make those changes too. By being there and listening to them, you get so much more out of that conversation than just tuning out and doing other things.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love that. I really do. I think it is so, I mean, it like fundamentally, that's exactly what gets the best out of everyone is if you actually hear them and can say, all right, I hear you. Here's what I think you're struggling with. What can I do to help? Right. And on the out, there may not be anything I can do to help, but if, even just having said it, I mean, a lot as a coach, half the time I get on a call with a client and really what they want is just to download, right? And I'm like, lay it on me, right? You pay me to listen, right? So, and that they just want to download something, and then I ask them questions and we play with it a bit. And sometimes just the act of often just the act of having someone that says, yeah, okay, that I get why that's troubling. Let's talk about it, right? Is like, I see whole bodies relax, right? Like shoulders drop and, breath be taken. And I'm like, oh, your face is a little less clenched, right? And it's because someone listened, right? And I was present, you're present, right? And it's so important. So I think it's such great advice. And it is, like, once again, very aligned with values. And I think that's important. So my last question that I ask everyone is, if you were going to give younger you some advice that might be beneficial to those who are listening, what would that be?
Balance is about your time, your energy, and figuring out who you are.
Yeah.
Because for me, like I've struggled with the work life balance and all that kind of stuff, but your balance is really about where's your energy for that day. It's different every day. If we learned anything over the last 4 or 5 years,
Right.
it's the fact of your energy is going to be different every day. Where can you invest that the most, and where is that going to be the most valuable? um, when it comes to investing your time, it needs to be in things that you care about, and it needs to be in things that help you. And you have to have things outside of work that inspire and motivate you, because that helps you get through your workday and get the things done that you need to get to those things that you absolutely love to do.
Yeah.
If they tie together, that's even better.
Right.
But
Right.
making sure that you've got those, that's vital. And then just making sure that you are checking in with yourself too, to be able to say, like, are if you feel out of balance or overwhelmed, like, what steps can you take? This
Yeah.
whole like the resiliency is the name, apparently.
Yeah.
Because what steps can you take to come back and say, like, is this aligning with my values? Is this aligning here? What do I need to do? Where do I need to throttle up or down to make adjustments? And the other piece too is that your joy is not something that is limitless. You have to figure out where to invest that, what to do with that in order to strike that balance so that you can actually move forward and be present in all parts of your life.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's funny. It reminds me, I often talk about this idea of like no one is riding in on a white horse to save you. You're going to have to save yourself. You can do that with the help of community and others. And the best way to save yourself is to be engaged in community and have friends and loved ones that you can lean on. So it's not a solitary saving yourself, but you are going to have to save yourself. Like there is no, and I always, when I give this advice, I always start by saying, are you getting enough sleep? Do you have enough water? Are you eating well? Are you, what's happening in your physical body? Do you feel overwhelmed? Are you anxious? What's going on? Because you cannot save yourself from a place of depletion. Joy shows up when we're filled back up, right? And I think that's some of what you're saying. Like this, like you must engage in and like, hey, what's going on with me? Because you're the only one who knows. So,
Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, it's
You
huge.
got to be present and have that check in with yourself too. It's not just a where are my core values and does it align here? It's with yourself. What do you need on your best day? And this is one of the things kind of coming full circle to that layoff, which I thought was going to be detrimental in my life. I'm like, I'm never going to get hired again.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a financial crisis. Nobody wants former bank employees. I went to interviews where people yelled at me for having worked there.
Oh, lovely.
Um, oh, yeah. But one of the things that came out of that is the fact of you're going to get through this. You're going to find something new, but you're also going to figure out who you are and you're going to do it on purpose. And you're going to look at this and say, these are the things I need, these are the things I want. And I go back to that. They gave us a deck of cards of all of the things you could possibly ever want.
Yeah.
And I found it the other day and I was like, you go through and you sort it. And basically, as you go through it, you're like, oh, you got onto your top five. These are the things I actually need. And somebody's like, oh, it's like a tarot deck for work. I'm like, no, it's a deck of like what is most important to you. Cause it's um, leading others, taking care of yourself, isolation, like what are those things?
Yeah.
And I use it quite a bit during the pandemic, but it brings you back to the grounding of yourself of what do you need in order to be present in for yourself and be there for yourself and also for those who are around you. And that is so important because without that, you can't move forward and you can't really evolve past situations that you face.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's my friend Sarah Papp, who I interviewed earlier. She said, you must always have your own back, right? And you have to start by having your own back before you can have anyone else's. And so I think, that so important to be able to really narrow it down to like, what, who am I and what do I need? Right? I love that.
Exactly.
I love that. Thank you so much for letting me interview you and for sharing your
Thank
wisdom.
you.
Really helpful. I really appreciated it.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you're watching this, you'll notice that right down here, there is a QR code where you can donate to the Malala Fund. And the Malala Fund ensures that women and girls have access to education in places where they historically have not, and that some women and girls who have access to education get access to leadership education. So if you'd like to donate, feel free to click on the little QR code, like take a little picture, snapshot of it and donate some money so that we can help continue to move that forward for women and girls. So thank you again, Amanda. It was so great to talk to you.
Thank you, Leah.